the fact that we created a space where someone is invited to talk, to trash talk productivity is impressive. Hi everyone, I'm Team Krief. I've been using Godot for the past 10 years or so. And being a solo indie game dev, I'm in a unique situation where I can say whatever I want and I cannot be fired if I point out all the mistakes my boss makes. Let's start with invisible walls. So, we've all played games, we all hate invisible walls. Yeah, you see a place and you're not able to reach it, and the game chooses to tell you that you're not able to reach it by not letting you reach it. And yeah, it's like you're in a game and we don't want you to go there. It breaks immersion, but it's pretty efficient, right? Like you just use a collision shape and you can work on the next part of your project. So yeah, it's efficient. And a lot of the times the devs are right. Like there's nothing to see there and you shouldn't go there. But what if instead of an invisible wall, there were actually something to get there? Or maybe you should discover by yourself that it's useless to go there. Good games do that. In Mario games, there are spots that are hard to reach. And if someone's actually go there, do you show them a blank space? Or no, maybe you could give them some coins, or maybe a secret or an Easter egg, something. It's not much, but what do you prefer? Like telling the player, yeah, you got there, good job? Or putting an invisible wall and telling them, you're not supposed to be there, you're supposed to have fun, go back having fun in the game we made. It's not a great look. So in GTA 5, if you try swimming out of bounds, do you reach an invisible wall? No. Your boat just stops working and you sink, and then a shark just eats you. So someone had to make that. Someone had to put the coins. Someone had to make the shark spawn and script it to follow you and hit you. So yeah. Let's go deeper. In Luigi Mansion 3, in room 506, like it's common knowledge, huh? You can, like the guest in this room is fond of golf. So you have a lot of golf equipment that is available in the room. And you can actually, like the golf, actually react to the physics of the game. And you can actually put a ball into the little mini golf hole here. That has actually no impact on the game whatsoever. But you can, like, there's a physics, there's a collision. You can actually use your vacuum in the game to make the ball go there. So it makes you, like, at launch it did nothing, and then they patched the game to make this give you a single coin. So it makes you wonder, were all those details planned? Did someone have planned that a developer would have to make the golf ball react to physics? Like, is a manager somewhere like, yeah, in room 506, we need this ball to go inside this mini golf hole? Or is that someone being productive? Or is it someone who was like, I think it's the right thing to do. Like, I think we should have those balls being able to go into that hole. And they try to convince other developers on the team, like, hey, let's make that happen. Or maybe worse, did they try to put that in the game without telling anyone? Like, were they like, wait, people will think that's not productive, but I think it's cool, so maybe I'll do it and no one will know. And after launch, they had to patch it because players were like, hey, I did that and it does nothing. So yeah, today we are talking about how rejecting the productivity mindset can make your game stand out. So, what are we talking about when I say productivity mindset here? So, it's having an objective and trying to reach those objectives as fast as possible with as less resources as possible. So that's what being productive means here. And having objectives and trying to reach them is not a bad thing at all. Like, it's something driving us to move. But it can lead to unproductive behaviors. How could a productive mindset lead us to unproductive behavior, you might ask? Well, productivity only makes sense in regard to a goal. And the productivity is how fast you are reaching that goal. However, who knows if you define the goal correctly to begin with? Perhaps the correct goal was elsewhere. And from that point of view, like in hindsight, you were being unproductive when you had the productive mindset. So yeah, you don't know where the better goal is exactly. So wandering around aimlessly can feel scary because you cannot measure, right? You cannot measure how productive you are because you don't know where those new goals, those perfect game here is. So yeah, it can be scary. So there's a reason why we choose a fixed destination and we plan our journey and try to force ourselves to stay on track. We want to release a game and we fear about our project going out of scope. Most people working on an indie game won't even release their game. Or like in my case, we have a lot of projects that are on pause, you know? So I know that feeling. You're making a game and each time you see opportunities to refine or research new opportunities like that, you always have that fear. I'm adding work. I'm going out of scope. I shouldn't do that. So we learn to avoid scope creep. Let's talk about scope creep. Scope. We can define the scope as the amount of work we will need to do to finish the project. So we can imagine the initial vision, the expected work. And then what's going to happen is that there's going to be work that is actually needed, that is underestimated. And there's also going to be work that is going to be added because you're adding new features and new ideas, and that's scope creep. We think about scope creep as this bad thing. Why do we think about scope creep as this bad thing? Because we want to actually release the game, and having that scope creep makes us away from the finish line. And sometimes people want us to finish our project, so that's why we don't like scope creep. But that's where we are missing something important. Those features, those ideas, we want to add so much to the project that we have to actively force ourselves into the productivity mindset. We have to actively say ourselves, like, wait, I should not work on this. We call that scope creep. We vilify it and we say, no, this is not the plan. Let's keep on track. And are you catching how stupid this is? Because we're making games that are supposed to be fun, and we are actively preventing ourselves to work on stuff that instinctively feels like it could be cool to work on or maybe to experiment with, just because we want to be efficient at making fun games. So it's a bit like if you want to go grab some apples to the store, and you have some apple trees on your way, and you get mad, you get angry because you have to avoid all the trees on your way, like that's making you angry. Scope creep is not bad in itself. It's bad because you cannot release your project, you cannot finish your project, and that's what is bad. Like the scope creep itself is not bad. So let's just take into account the scope creep when we plan our project. I'm not saying to accept all kinds of scope creep. So yeah, so sometimes users and other people will give you some tasks to add to your game. Only add things that you feel like will be good to your game because other kind of scope creep can be toxic. But okay, let's add some scope creep to the project. How do we make that work? Because it's still too much work to do. We don't want to have to crunch. So what's the solution? The solution is let's just plan to make a worse game. I'm not saying to make a worse game. I'm saying let's plan to make a worse game. And how that way we will be able to take into account everything and keep being capable of finishing the project. How do we do that? How do we reduce the initial vision? Well, let's just try to let's try to check less boxes. What I mean by boxes, like let's make it an RPG, let's make it, like you have all those ideas you want for your game, and sometimes you force yourself to have those ideas, like let's have 1,694 planets to explore. That was, someone said we need to have 1,694 planets to explore. That was the goal, okay? So, by choosing boxes to check, you are trying to make a game people will like to buy, when you should focus on making a game people will like to play. And a lot of games seem to have been made by people trying to just check those boxes and are worse for it. I'm sure you can figure out which project this is. Another example is Metroid, the recent Metroid Prime. It was criticized for this giant desert. It's a vast open space that you can motorbike around, but it felt a bit forced and useless. And according to the dev themselves, an open world felt like a requirement after Zelda Breath of the Wild. So they kept trying to tweak it because it did not feel right for a Metroid Prime title to have it. What would the game have been without this box to check? What if you had way less boxes to check? Even if you never choose the boxes intentionally, think about what you expect from your project. What if your initial vision was less challenging? You'll work the same amount. I'm not saying work less. I'm saying you will work the same amount, maybe with less crunch. But during development, you'll either have higher quality standards, or you'll be able to pick more apples along the way. And you'll be able to add fun stuff to your game, and you'll be able to course correct, and to actually just have more fun. And after the fact, you might even have a more ambitious project than the one you would have had with the boxes to check. And you'll be proud. And that's important. That's really important to be proud, because for the next part, being proud is key when you might have to sell your game. I figured out way too late into my professional game dev journey, and I'm not alone. You actually have to sell the games after you make them. I suffered from having way too much boxes to check myself. And when it really sunk in that I will have to actually sell the game at some point, it was not an abstract thing, like the development was progressing. It was not an abstract thing anymore. I felt paralyzed because I was working so hard and I'm still far from release. And to release on time, I need to crunch, I need to drop features. And I couldn't imagine after all of this to have to promote the game, like knowing it's a game that was painful to make and that is so far from what I have envisioned. So I refused. I stopped working on that project. It was called Crafty County. I know how long it will take if I wanted to finish that project, and that's not something possible for me right now. And I would not like to sell that project if it's not the way I intended to. So I could feel bad about it, but I think I made the right choice, because if I had fallen into the sunk cost fallacy, I would just have crunch and then release the game, but not being enthusiastic about the release, and the game will be an okay game. I don't have any contact in the industry, so releasing a game not enthusiastically, that is just okay, will be a financial disaster. So having such a financial disaster after a painful development cycle, like you will just feel depressed, and maybe you will stop your development journey. And it happens to a lot of indies. Instead of enjoying releasing nice games that we can be proud of, a lot of us see the market and we are scared. We want our games to be competitive. We choose types of games that are not the one we would like to work on, but the ones that are trendy. We have expectations that are way too big from the get-go. And then we force ourselves into a productivity mindset that pushes us to burn out or rush and crunch on our own project. We don't have to do that. Players don't want us to do that. So yeah, I learned two things from that experience. Firstly, the release of your game is just one of the steps. You have to plan for this in your project. You have to plan for this. You have to have a lot of energy when you release, because after that you'll have to be able to promote your game. You have to be able to listen to players, to make patches, to make updates. So this is just a step. It's not the end. It's not because it's the end of the development that is the end of the project. Secondly, you'll have to genuinely love what you've made, because you are going to tell people that they should buy it. And it's so much easier to sell something when you are sure that it's actually good. We had the boxes to check earlier, because some people think it's easier to sell the game when the boxes are checked. But honestly, what's the most important thing? Having a game that checks all the boxes, or having an unassuming game that people love and recommend? Let's put it that way. Would you rather have to sell a car whose engineering is spotty and it keeps getting recalled, or a really good bicycle? Even ignoring that we are in Amsterdam right now, one of those are way more pleasant than the other. So here's an extreme example of what I'm talking about. A simple initial vision with scope creep let loose. I made the game Fallacy Quiz. I chose a topic that was interesting to me, detecting fallacious reasoning. And the initial plan was simple, just a quiz. The core gameplay was done in 2 months, and I spent the next 10 months letting that scope creep in just the right ways. And people were asking me, like, why are you still adding useless stuff to your game? Just release it already. But something was bothering me. How can they tell if something is useless for a game? What does it make sense? Like, can we say a game isn't the point of a game to be useless? Can a game be useful? That's strange, right? So here we are conflating useless in regard to finishing the project, that could make sense, with useless in regard of the game experience, and that doesn't make much sense. Because if we start thinking like that, we are going to make really bad games, because the entire game could be considered as something useless. So what are you going to do? Remove stuff from the game, and at the end, you remove all the substance, and you only have a technical thing, like you're making a tool at that point, not a game. So in my case, what was optional and useless to my quiz, but that I included, was
having all the definitions of the fallacies in an actual book, a glossary, like I made a virtual book for them. Having a really refined paper shader. Having an animation during the game that will make you see yourself playing the game on your computer and cheating using the glossary.
I over-engineered the menus to choose the difficulty in the game. And in the end, what surprised me was how impactful those optional things were to the players.
You could tell me that it's useless that the spine of the book realistically shifts, but all those useless things put together are the reason why people are even interested in getting the game. You can find quizzes about fallacies online, but none of them have that special care put into them. That's why it grabbed the attention of streamers I never contacted before, that decided it was worth it to play the game in front of an audience of tens of thousands of people. And here, I'm just showing you stuff that looks good on a slide, but I also spent way too much time on mechanics the players won't even know exist that make the quiz a better experience. All of this was an anecdotal evidence, by the way.
Is a feature or detail useless? Just ask yourself this. Imagine being a child in front of the game. It's a rainy day. It's one of the only games you have access to, you know. Is this feature, if the feature is missing, is this going to frustrate you? Is this going to be frustrating? Is this feature really something that obsessing you? Is this feature or idea something you'll be playing with, even if it's not adding to the game completion? Maybe it's something you're going to play with for hours. And maybe that's something you want to talk about with your friends. We make games for those moments. What we are talking about here is what we call attention to detail. I think today, more than ever before, we're going to have more and more people publishing games, and we'll feel more and more pressure to do better if you lose grasp on what we are doing. You might try to reach the finish line as fast as possible. You might try to use an ethical generative tool to stay competitive. But I think, in my opinion, that this is not a market where people will care that much about your productivity. What will the player will look for? What game will stand out? The more realistic ones? The ones with longer playtime? No. I think that what will matter is intent. Attention to detail. Video games are one of the few fields where indies are really a thing. And that's because we are bringing something to the players that you cannot get with more money, with more compute nodes, with more office, with more people, or with more AI data centers. And that is caring about what we make. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tim. Any questions from the audience?
Hello, thank you for
Hi.
the fantastic presentation. I have a question. So I am just a hobbyist and I've got this idea in the back of my head. It came like a few years ago. I've worked on it a tiny bit. Should I ever even set deadlines for myself, or not really deadlines, more just like milestones, more like maybe this year I could actually get started on this point and figure out maybe where this can go, where will the scope end?
Yeah, that depends on what your goal is. You said you're like an hobbyist, so if the goal is to just work on this and improve yourself with the tools you're using and be curious and experiment, is finishing the project even part of the goal? And if you want to finish the project, yes, at some point you might have to decide for a limit, because there's no limit to imagination, but there's a limit with our time and with our capabilities. So yeah, as a hobbyist, you have the luxury to expand as much as you want, with a tragic limit.
Only so many hours in the day. Thank you.
Fantastic talk. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks.
Your advice, while very good, have you thought about how much of this is relevant to different people in regards to, obviously you're funded by Patreon and you have other income streams and such. How have you considered this applying to people obviously working a full-time job and this is on the side, or people who are, this is the primary income, or different? Have you considered how that applies?
Yeah, so this talk is given by a solo indie dev. So this is the main perspective, but I almost included. I did not, because it was scope creep for the presentation. I almost envisioned like a part where I was all of this still relevant for companies, but more for the managerial roles, where I think a lot of managers should understand that people are way more efficient when you just let them do their stuff, and the boxes to check, when some managers will come and say you have to do that. The more broad it is, the more the employees will be able to express themselves, and they will be way more efficient when they just work on stuff they want to work on. So for companies, I'm not sure you have a lot of say. As I said at the beginning, I'm sure a lot of developers will just include stuff because it's fun, and thank you for that. And they have to do that in spite of the organizations, which is sad. For other developers, maybe like that will have a full-time job, again, what's the goal? If the goal is not even to make a profit on the games, maybe you will not even have to sell the game. So maybe you'll not even have to meet that requirement. So that can change things immensely. That's why it's interesting to change the context sometimes. That's why people really like game jams, where they don't have to care about that. So yeah, that really depends. And that's why I said you might have to sell your game at some point. And that transition is hard for some people, because we come from hobbyist background, a lot of us, and sometimes we don't understand that we have to shift to wait, I need to actually make that my source of income at some point. So yeah, I think it was interesting to talk about exactly the fact that if you come from this background and don't understand that, you can end up pushing yourself to crunch and being a really bad boss for yourself. Yeah. Was it acceptable answer?